Hi there everyone, Lars here with a special and long overdue review and analysis for the amazing fan project Murder Drones Intermission. This gorgeous piece of fan animation done by Ghoulinfuschia is just awesome. Really, up and down the whole board, from the writing to the voice acting to the use of music, effects, sound effects, and just the whole gorgeous package is fantastic. In so many ways, I feel like this is one of those episodes that everyone would have absolutely loved to have seen in Murder Drones proper. That we could have just gotten more of these characters being themselves, developing their relationships, exploring their powers, exploring a little bit more of the world, setting up big horror moments later on down the road, and this is all a fan fiction story. Intermission is the peak, the pinnacle of what anyone can expect from a great fan fiction. Let me quickly explain. Normally, when we think of fan fictions, we just think of fans wanting to do something interesting, creative, or cringeworthy with a story that they really enjoy, whether it be putting characters into an alternate universe, doing a different sequence of events, adding in their own original characters, or completely deviating from the story based off of what they believe to be a significant point within the plot where a character could have chosen to do something different. What would have happened then? It's a bunch of fun what ifs. Now then, sometimes fan fictions just get overly gratuitous with what the author would rather have had happen, and then just weird things begin to ensue, or sometimes the author wishes to just mesh a whole bunch of ideas together and see what happens. Sometimes they want to live out their own weird fantasies through their fan fiction, but when fan fiction is at its best, it's when an author realizes, hey, the original creator could have done something really interesting here, but they didn't. They decided to go along with their own ideas and with what they intended for their plot and characters. But again, what if we got to see this moment? What if this character had made this decision? What if this one event, which kind of seems rather random, had not happened? What could be the butterfly effect? When a fanfiction writer decides to really dig in deep into the lore, into the characters, and really asking big questions about them and the plot, that allows for the fanfiction writer to normally create an excellent addendum, this brilliant what if that fans of the original should be able to read then this story and have it still resonate with them because of how close it is to the characters, to the world, to the lore that they have fallen in love with. Murder Drones Intermission is a brilliant fanfiction piece because it feels so clearly as though it could have been inserted between episodes 4 and 5, and it would have fit in perfectly. Now, with that being said, I do believe that there are, well, some inconsistencies. Now then, this does come down to fan interpretation, and I will get into that once I talk about what Intermission may have gotten a little bit wrong or didn't get quite right, because even though I've been saying the word perfect multiple times, well, there really is no perfect story out there, except for maybe the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now, to jump to an overview of this episode's events, it's rather straightforward. Immediately after the events of episode 4, Uzi is turning into an abject monster, is being plagued by nightmares and her transformations, and so En decides that he's going to help her come to grips with this transformation as she's becoming more murder drone-like and less like a worker drone. And hey, one of the things that he can help her out with is flight. So he ropes V in basically against her will, but V decides ultimately that this might be a fun exercise in tormenting Uzi, as well as this means spending some time with En and keeping an eye on the little purple problematic thing. We then get a montage of Uzi absolutely failing and sucking to be a good flyer. And this is fun because, hey, we get to see Uzi actually learning. Sure, she's a character with massive amounts of plot armor, but it's nice to see a main character struggle a little bit. Not because we enjoy them going through the pain, but the pain that they go through ultimately makes them a better person through how they persevere and grow as a result. Now, during all of this practice, an accident happens, and suddenly Absolute Solver takes control as Uzi has got to repair herself, and Sin returns for a brilliant little cameo moment. This then results in an epic battle between Eldritch Uzi and N and V, who work together, and it's great to finally see them working in tandem. And against all the odds that Absolute Solver can throw against them, N and V manage to pull out the win and defeat Eldritch Uzi, and blasts away her head, and she then heals herself. But at this point, V is convinced this purple problem is an absolute abomination who's going to destroy us. I am not going to give Uzi the time of day. I'm going to kill her. And then Uzi pops off because she's scared of what she's becoming, and I think also to a certain degree she realizes she's about to get killed. So she runs, V goes into chase, N chases after V, and V finds Uzi crouching in the ruins of the old Copper 9, and for a brief moment she spots herself. Not Uzi, but her old self, as she was transforming into her own eldritch abomination. She's cowed by this memory of her past and decides to not kill Uzi, but teach her to transform herself back into who she once was. The trio reunites. They cry a little bit, they share their feelings. V's like, you can't fix yourself, and you can't fix her, you can't fix yourself, we're all screwed up, why don't we just do the easy thing and give in to our rage and insanity, because that's the only way that you can live with everything that is happening to you. Which inspires Uzi instead to tap into their brains, and thus ensues the events of episode 5. So with that quick rundown completes, what really is it that makes Intermission such a beloved piece of fan fiction? So much so that fans are like, I have got no problem whatsoever considering this canon material. And it's not just because they're starved of good Murder Drones content from Glitch. Well, I mean, there's a little bit of that going on. But ultimately, it's because N feels like N. Uzi feels like Uzi. V, for the most part, feels like V. And they play off of each other incredibly well. Throughout the series, we've kind of missed out on great opportunities, minus episode 6, to really see this dynamic trio in action. And getting to see them in action was a ton of fun. The dialogue fit really well for these characters, the jokes, the dark humor, the dark situations, all of it fit in. And while I might say, you know what, maybe V was a little bit too gracious towards Uzi at certain times, and we don't see her actually embracing that until episode 6 canonically, a lot of what V does, trying to help out N, and then trying to murder Uzi, and then just being completely against so many of these plans, is absolutely in line with her character. Now then, while she and N should heal very quickly from the damage that they take from Absolute Solver, I am really glad that Ghoulinfuschia actually kept them looking really beat up, because beat up N, and especially beat up V, just look sick. And it works out especially well for when V begins to snap. That was really, really good. And getting into V's head fit perfectly with what we know of her character. So all of this is just incredibly complimentary, and there's nothing odd about the world building that was completely made up or introduced. In fact, we've actually gone back to vampiric disassembly drones hanging upside down. I like that. And then also seeing Uzi completely regrow her head, something that we haven't really seen much of in later episodes. Now granted, there's a reason why Liam left that out as far as Uzi is concerned, because when N chops off her arm at the end of episode 6, we're left to wonder, will she regain her arm? But obviously, because of Absolute Solver kicking on in, she was always going to regenerate. And so I like that this episode doesn't shy away from that, but shows, yes, Uzi is very much becoming a disassembly drone, therefore she has so many of the abilities that N and V possess. And it's also great seeing just a little bit more of N and V pulling out all of the stops to fight against Absolute Solver, and to show that as qualified murder drones themselves, that they can actually work well together as a team. This is something that a lot of people have wondered about, if these two could really work well together, and we get to see see that, and we get to see them delivering a little bit of payback against Sin, but without them becoming so dominant that as you continue to watch it throughout the series, you think, oh yeah, sure, N and V have got this. They'll absolutely destroy that little gremlin. But no, you're left realizing that Sin can strike at any moment. She is absolutely a threat, and her powers could very easily overwhelm N or V on a one-on-one situation, and even when they are a tag team duo, they will still get wrecked in the process. This preserves the danger and mystery that Sin possesses. And again, Ghoulinfuschia did a fantastic job with these characters by getting some of that humor and meta commentary that Sin obviously would have in the middle of a fight. So all of this is working out really well, and according to my breakdown of what makes a good fight, where you've got the setup, the action, and the payoff, this episode had an excellent fight to it. It didn't need to be big, over the top, and just, whoa, mind-bending and mind-melting. It didn't need to be that at all. It was succinct, it was to the point, it fit with the characters, it fit within the world building, it was properly set up with the training montage, it was well executed in the moment, and the consequences lead us to this fantastic heartfelt moment between V and Uzi, as well as then between V, N, and Uzi when V just completely melts down. This was so well executed on so many levels. Now then, if I'm going to be critical, which I need to be, there are two areas that I feel this episode delved a little bit more into fanfiction speculation and self-gratification, as opposed to what maybe Liam Vickers would have done if he were the one in charge of this particular story. It comes down to, well, again, V should not be revealing so much about herself at this point in the story. So many people within the fanbase, myself included, absolutely adores V. We want more of her, and I still hold to my belief that she's not yet dead within the canon story. Well, we're just gonna have to wait and see here by the end of the month when the final episode drops. But V is very much withdrawn. She does not want anyone to know about her past, about her weaknesses, about what happened, and we can speculate as to why this is. Intermission gave us a reason, and it's a reason that works really well. However, it is a bit inconsistent with what we see about V in episode 6, where again she's so guarded, she holds everyone back at arm's length, so much so that towards the end she realizes, like, I've screwed up my chances with N, I'm completely messed up at this point, and the best thing I can do for N is to sacrifice myself so that way he is safe, and I'm going to trust in Uzi, who I've now seen is going through this absolutely awful experience, and she's fighting it, so I can trust her. That is a big emotional moment in episode 6. Intermission kind of runs just slightly counter to it and takes away a little bit of the oomph of that moment by V having her excellent confession in this episode. So it's interesting because it works so well, but it takes a little bit away from the epic moment that we get in episode 6. Now, some people will say it complements it very, very well, and I think that that is a fine opinion to have, and I would actually love to have that debate with someone. I think that I can be persuaded to believe otherwise, and maybe I might be able to persuade them against it. It comes down to the minutia of what we believe would work best for V's character arc. And ultimately, Liam would get the final say in that, since he is the creator. There is one other problem, though, at the very end of Intermission, and that is what leads them to actually delve into the memories of N and V. Within episode 5, we get the hint that something began happening to N and V. Very likely that Sin, realizing just how close they were to discovering some of the big mysteries and secrets that she could not allow them to get, otherwise they would not play along with her plans in episode 6, which then leads to the devastating consequences of episode 7. She has to scramble their memories once again, this time completely delete them. Now, we don't know what actually led up to this moment, but we kind of get the inference that this was a bit of a shock because V goes ballistic when she realizes that Uzi's been poking around in her memories. Intermission sets it up that Uzi intentionally is going on in there, and V's like, I'm not going to let you do this. And then Uzi's like, oh, just more empty threats. And while this is fun, cute banter, it runs contrary to the events of episode 5. Is it an egregious break of canon? No, not really, but it does stick out a bit like a sore thumb, where you realize it doesn't quite match up the way that you want to. It's not quite like trying to put a square peg into a round hole, but it doesn't entirely match up. And within a story, when events aren't organically 100% matching on up, it doesn't take the reader completely out of the story, but it does cause a kind of subconscious irk. And depending on the audience member that you're dealing with, they might begin to check out after that. Or they might just say, okay, I can see what happened right there. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe it's intentional. I'm going to keep on reading or watching to see what will happen next. And that's going to happen all the time within stories. But you as the creator, you want to minimize that as much as possible and make everything flow as smoothly as possible, so that way you can minimize the risk of losing your audience along the way. Because if they don't finish your story, well, then what's the point? You want them to finish your story because your story deserves to be finished by them. So that way they can completely enjoy the adventure that you've taken them on and hope that it resonates with them. So ultimately, my two critiques are that I believe that V was maybe a little bit too open with her thoughts and feelings, no matter how much I really like that scene, and the event that leads Uzi into patching into N and V's memories doesn't quite work with the events of episode 5. Now then, I am totally fine with excusing how N and V don't immediately regenerate after their fight with Absolute Solver, because it works so well. Aesthetically speaking, it shows just how broken and deranged these two murder drones are becoming, and especially for V, how she is almost blinded by what's happened to her in her past. It is a great artistic way, a great visual way of communicating just how broken and gone she is. It makes the tragedy between her and N even more poignant, whereas with N, sure, he's beaten up, he's scruffed up, he's slashed up, but his eyes are still both working. He can see things far more clearly, and while he might be a little bit naive and hopeful in the face of something so dark and twisted, it goes to show that he is able to embrace the situation for what it is. He is the key towards fixing so much of what is wrong, and his hope and friendship with Uzi is essential in helping Uzi go on her hero's journey to become the person that she needs to be to face Absolute Solver. That is a great visual choice, and because that is so well communicated in this episode, I don't mind letting it slide by. So as writers, what can we learn from this excellent fanfiction episode? What my writing advice would be is this. If you want to write fanfiction, you're free to write whatever you want. But if you want it to be a fanfiction that resonates with a larger part of the fan base that you are a part of, you need to make sure that you're really doing your research into the world building, into the plot, into the characters, everything that you possibly can, because you want to mirror that as much as possible within your what if scenario. The more that you step away from the actual canon of the story, the more people that you will lose along the way. Now then, if you just want to write whatever story you want to write, that's absolutely fine. You want to write the story that you're writing to the best of your ability. But again, if you want to write a fanfiction that will really reach to the majority of the fan base, to the majority of the audience of the original material that you're borrowing from, you want to be as close to it as possible, so that way when you introduce your what if scenario, what if this had happened? What if these characters had gotten together? What if this character had actually died? What if they had made this choice? That will then help to show everyone that you know what you're talking about as you begin to explore a new sequence of events, and that these characters still are the people that they fell in love with, that this is still the world that they know, despite the fact that now the plot has been completely altered by you, the writer. That takes some work. That takes some good writing, but it can be done, and when it is done, people praise it, people love it, and you get all of the acclaim that this amazing Intermission episode has been getting. And if that's what you want to do as a fan fiction author, then I absolutely applaud it, because that is some quality writing. So make sure that you're doing your research, make sure that you really understand these characters, and that you're not projecting yourself or your thoughts onto them. This is a common critique that I see a lot, and I've been blamed a lot for that in my own fan fictions. And while sometimes I can actually say, yes, you're absolutely right, I did interpose my own ideals onto these characters, for other stories I'm like, I'm sorry, but you're interposing your own shipping ideals and what you would want these characters to be onto them. I have done my best. I've done my research to try to mimic the mimic the dialogue and the feelings and the expressions of these characters, and I'm now just exploring who they could become in a different sequence of events. So that will do it for this video, but if you're looking for more writing insights, reviews, analyses, and advice, then please feel free to check out our other videos here on our channel. And while you're doing that, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe. We would love to have you join us on this incredible adventure that we call writing. And if you're looking for another story, a fresh story that you haven't come across before, then I highly recommend that you check out some of the books that we have written. Links for them are in the description below. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video and for sharing your own thoughts and comments with us in the comment section, and for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.